Greetings, mythology students, coming to you from a different room in the house, a bit brighter. One of my many bookcases and endless books behind me. Yes, I'm a biblioholic. I'm sure some of you are too. Today we're talking about Joseph Campbell, and the predecessor, my colleague who used to teach this class, based the whole class around Joseph Campbell. I think I've mentioned this to a couple of you. And I leave him late in the semester for a good reason. Once you go through Campbell's ideas, they become ubiquitous and sort of take over everything that you read. I didn't want that to happen. I wanted us to have a few weeks of analyzing on our own terms before we got into this, his ideas about syncretism and homogeneity. Because then you start perceiving everything on those terms. So that's the reason why we're only just discussing him now. I know some of you have referenced him on the hero's journey in some of your papers and comments. There's a very formidable section that hopefully you've read, Joseph Campbell, the hero with 1,000 faces. I won't go into everything. And also there are sections in the book that show you how his ideas are then put into practice in terms of analyzing certain stories. So just a few things. I'm going to, in the description part of this video, put a couple of YouTube links. One is to Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Adventure. It was a short video which explains it. And another is The Hero's Journey, Teacher Edition, that I think shows a bit of the PBS special with Bill Moyers that you might find interesting. So I'll let you explore those, stop the video and explore those on your own if you wish to. Joseph Campbell, massive figure, 1904 to 1987. So left us, well, in my lifetime anyway, and a massive figure of comparative mythology and religion. His ideas have become huge in both those fields. Definitely in the 60s and 70s, even through the 90s and early part of this century, his ideas really had a grip on the way that we perceive of myth. They became almost ubiquitous or synonymous even with the idea of mythography. So what I'm going to have you do is argue with him, and I'll talk about that towards the end of the video. Anyway, he discusses 4 functions of mythology. The metaphysical function, the symbols and mythic metaphors that surround the language of myth. The cosmological function, explaining the physical phenomena of the world. So for him, myth is definitely embodies everything that you experience. It's experiential. Sociological function, myth conforms to existing social order, and we need it to survive, and that brings along his 4th function, the pedagogical. So it's a teaching guide for a successful passage through the stages of life. So myth has all those functions. His main work is Hero with 1,000 Faces, came out in 1949 to huge success. Basically, his idea about mythology is that myths tell the same story even across different cultures and eons. It's the story of every man. It may include a success story, glory, riches, fame. It may be a story of destruction or failure. But he certainly did not come up with these ideas on his own. He borrows a lot from the thinkers of the period, particularly Otto Rank, who sort of synthesized the male aspects of society as being something that we all share, and then Jung, and a little bit Freud as well, the female aspects like the anima, which we'll get into next week, and that storytellers provide the same functions for all societies, whether it's the atonement through a relationship with your father, or undergoing temptation through a goddess or a mother type figure. These stories are repetitive, and humans are not capable of going outside of these very narrow parameters in their storytelling. In the PBS special, which is very famous now, Bill Moyers called him the world's foremost authority on myth, and that stuck. He became the go-to for this particular discipline. His ideas, his main idea is the monomyth, the same patterns repeating, the retelling of the same stories, the reduction of myths to one basic story, or a story of very similar shapes. As I said, he borrows a lot, so Jung's idea of the collective conscious, this is something that happens in our collective consciousness. These are spontaneous productions of our collective psyches, and that we basically render life and our stories about life in the same way, about the same things, the same journeys, with the same sort of struggles. He borrows from Freud, Freud's idea that we are built or engineered from our childhood experiences, for instance, the Oedipal complex, which we'll get into next week, and that we all seek some sort of rite of passage through some mythological adventure or journey. So he came up with the hero's journey as being a monomyth that tells all of our stories about how we're seeking to have some sort of influence upon this strange thing that we are thrown into called life. And his ideas took root and became massively popular and influenced all kinds of pockets of academia. I'll give you one good example. In the religious realm, the idea that all religions are the same, all gods are the same, we're all worshipping the same sort of entity, really took root. We have the Jesus ministries who syncretized a lot of those ideas. The idea of the pagan Christ, or Christianity borrowing from paganism and synthesizing those two main systems into a new system. All the dying and rising gods, from Osiris that we talked about when we did the Egyptian week, to Jesus, to Krishna, to Tammuz, all the different sacrificial figures can really be synthesized into one. This became huge and took over a lot of contemporary religious studies in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and you still see people writing these types of works, some of which have more merit than others. Some are a bit fanciful, and others actually do tie these things together purposely. So the hero's journey, I've given you a handout, and you don't have to fill this in, but I want you to look through the different steps of the journey. The separation of departure includes retreat from the world, the call to adventure, refusal of the call in some cases, supernatural aid, the crossing of the threshold, in the belly of the whale, which is a reference to Jonah in the Bible, trials and victory section, the road of the trials, the meeting with the goddess, women as temptress, atonement with the Father, apotheosis, the ultimate boon. Some versions of this slightly differ, so you might see slightly different versions of these lists. The return, the refusal of return, the magic flight, the rescue from without, crossing the return threshold, master of two worlds, freedom to live. These are all parts of a singular journey that are common to all of us and common to all of our stories. Sometimes when you hear these different parts of the hero's journey, you start thinking of examples, especially with all this mythology being fresh in your minds. For instance, the Destiny Calls is the story of the great Gautama Buddha, isn't it? His whole quest was a call to destiny. The active-passive hero can be the difference between Theseus or Hercules and Odysseus, who was a much more reluctant sort of hero. The refusal of the call at first is something we've read a lot about. Daphne running from Apollo. Various reluctant heroes that had to be sort of goaded into their quests. Protective figures, supernatural guides, we have read through tons of them in all the different mythologies. Confronting the gates of the unknown as part of a quest is something that's all the characters that went down to Hades had to do, right, from Persephone onwards. Heroes being swallowed up by their quests. We think of Osiris in the box. Long series of tasks for heroes to undergo. We've talked about Cupid, we've talked about Hercules, Pericles, Perseus, Theseus. They all had to do a series of tasks, as you have in the 12 tasks for this class. All the psychological dangers, the importance of women in these stories, often reduced to goddess, crone, mother, temptress type figures. And you can include a rebuttal of this for your task this week. I'll get to that in a minute. Rites of passage, initiation. We've talked about Demeter being the progenitor of a cult or a faith system. So a lot of these became rites in religious circles. Illumination, wisdom, understanding, apotheosis, new levels of understanding. The return involves this. The hero must adapt from the world of the adventure to the returned world, the return to reality, the reintegration, bringing the magic of the journey back into your regular life so that you are newly enlightened. We can think of lots of characters that have done this in all the stories that we've read for this class. So what I want you to do for your task this week, what is it, task 9 I think it is, basically I want you to critique Joseph Campbell. Alright, so Campbell talks about syncretism, universal conclusions to everything being sort of squashed, maybe even reduced. There might be a level of reductionism here, shoehorning everything into simple explanations might be your critique. It's a very masculinist system, isn't it? Maybe that will be part of your critique. Cultural hegemony. What does that mean? Well, the people that are deciding that all our myths are telling the same story are from the same cultures. Do you have a problem with that? Does the reduction of Western thinkers belittle the myths of the East? It might be something that you could consider. So write a paragraph on your critique of the hero's journey, of Campbell's ideas, of this monomyth as your task, and send it either via message or through the assignment section. And then to check into this video, look at this worksheet, the heroic journey that I sent you. And in the comments section, list the story that we've read this semester that most fits the journey. And it can be something that we read together or something you did on your own for one of the papers. And also the story that least fits the journey. So you don't have to fill this in. Just read through it. And which two stories come to mind which best reflect the hero's journey and which you feel don't reflect it at all. So those are your jobs this week. All right. First of all, the task, your own rebuttal of Campbell, and the comment in the video, which is to find the best and worst example of the hero's journey, a la the sheet that I sent out to you with these video links. All right. Enjoy. I'll be back to talk about Levi-Strauss. Well, just hopefully be the next video for you. See you then.